Welcome back to Yellowstone Grand Prix, where this time out we have a special one because we're covering all 8 races that took place during this tournament night. We're at the Red Bull Ring in Spielberg, Austria. A very short track with long straights and high-speed corners. The track limits for turn 1, the penultimate corner, and the final corner are very deceptive. Regarding cars, all drivers are going to be using the Praga R1, the GT3 killer. Despite its lack of power compared to GT3 cars from its 4-cylinder turbocharged Renault engine, it's very lightweight and has a lot of downforce, so it's incredibly fast. Regarding qualifying, we have a familiar face at the top step. It's Jake in the number 3 seat, with the only car to get into the 129s. The number 4 seat, piloted by Waleed, takes P2, over 1.7 seconds behind. Next up in the number 6 seat, we have some new blood. It's Barrett, and he's in P3, not too far behind Waleed. Another returning driver in the number 5 seat is Mitch in P4. More new blood in P5, it's in the number 1 seat with Coulter. And unfortunately for our driver in the number 2 seat, Trevor was unable to set a clean qualifying time, clearly struggling with the track. We'll hope to see him recover in the race. The formation lap is coming to an end, and our lead driver Jake cuts the beam, and the race is underway. Waleed takes a look down the inside. We'll see if he makes a move going into turn 1. Jake clearly has a little bit more pace. Looks like he's going to hold on to P1. Further in the back, Trevor gets a run onto Mitch. Coulter's making moves as well. He's up into P3. He's gotten around Barrett. Trevor's going to have the run to poke ahead of Mitch. Turn technically 3 is about to come up, and it's the tightest corner on the track. Will we see a move here? There's going to be some cars going side by side into the braking zone, that's for sure. Coulter and Trevor are no longer side by side with the people they're trying to pass. They've mostly got around, but Barrett is going to try around the outside to get a little bit of a run. He heads up onto that sausage curb. Those bumps unsettled the car enough to where it isn't going to give him a run. Coulter's going to be able to hold on to P3 for now. Trevor's going to be taking a look at the back of Barrett. He's getting a little bit closer. But Coulter's outbraked himself. He's into the gravel trap now. Barrett's going to be able to make up P3. And Coulter is now at the back of the grid. The braking into turn 4 is extremely difficult because it's off camber and it's downhill, so the car doesn't stop as well. Luckily for Trevor, that means that he makes up 2 positions halfway through lap 1, recovering from a hard qualifying. The first 3 rounds are just qualifying heats, so finishing position isn't too important. It's all about your quickest lap time in the race. Jake's built quite the sizable gap to Waleed already. It's a 3.5 second gap from 1st to 3rd at the moment. These heat races are pretty much designed to be less dramatic. Reciting what I said last about how your finishing position doesn't really matter, that means that drivers aren't really going to be trying to go for overtakes here. They're just trying to build a gap and set some fast laps. But Mitch seems to be all over the back of Trevor at the moment. It's not necessarily a bad thing to be behind someone until you're too close, because when you're behind someone, you can get their slipstream. They'll punch a hole in the air through you so you can go faster on the straights. We have a yellow sector. It looks like Trevor might have spun out in turn 1. We'll get a pretty good idea after this replay, I hope. It's a little bit hard to tell, but it would seem that that was driver error more than a forced incident. I think what happened there was he just went, oh, that's another off. That is Waleed off into 3rd now, potentially 4th, and it will be 4th. But regarding our previous incident, I don't think that was Mitch's fault. I couldn't see any contact between the two of them. I think Trevor went on the curb a little bit too much. Waleed outbraked himself. Not quite as badly as Coulter did, but he made the same mistake. That's a hard braking zone to get down. First flying lap of the race now coming to an end. Waleed gets wide again in the next corner. That's going to be a lost position to Coulter, and it's going to be... might be 6th, actually. That's a little bit of a sketchy rejoin, but Trevor gets on the brakes in time. Waleed off into the gravel again. Maybe his tires are a little bit dirty, but... that Sector 2 was rough for him for sure on this lap. That was about every corner that you could go off on. Jake hasn't made mistakes so far, and he's just set a flying lap. Not sure if that counted though. We haven't had the cameras on so far, and we aren't seeing a lap time from him yet. Maybe he hasn't set a valid one, but he's leading and he hasn't made any mistakes, so that's a step in the right direction. When he does eventually set a valid lap, I'm guessing it's going to be from mid-30s all the way to high 29s. It's a little bit of lack of consistency there. You would expect some lower 30s, but Jake's pretty good, so I think that he'll be able to put at least one decent, maybe low 30, high 29 lap in. Mitch's previous lap was valid, which leads me to believe that he didn't make any contact with Trevor. It's a mid-32, 132.5 by the looks of it. Willie gets that line wrong and spins in turn technically 3. Technically 3 is really difficult because it's not only is it the tightest corner on the track, but the gearing in this car is also very rough. If you leave it in second gear, then it's bogged down on the way out of the corner. If you go into first, it has the potential to spin and hit the red line over and over like you might have saw there. Mitch seems to have made a similar mistake to Waleed, either getting too far on the inside curb or maybe touching the grass on the exit. We might see a lap time for Jake come in though. Barrett's made his way into second place, and he does make it through with a, what is that, 130.9 essentially, 130.86. Not a bad start, but there's definitely a lot of room for improvement there, especially considering his qualifying time, which was a 29, so he definitely still has that in him. Let's try to get a look at his approach into turn technically 3. It looks like he's going to brake around between the 150-100 meter mark. And it would sound like he's using first gear there. He seems to go very high up to the red line and then shift. Maybe he isn't letting that car sit there for long enough. First gear maxed out in this car is around 50 miles an hour. That's around where you want to go into second gear if you decide to take technically 3 in first. Apologies, my English is struggling today. We'll take a look at Barrett's time really quick. It's a 131.4. Once again, not bad for a first lap, but there's definitely some people that are going to be able to push into the 130s pretty consistently and pretty easily. So hopefully he gets a little bit more experience and a little bit more practice, and he can start getting into the high to mid 30s, which is around where you want to be if you want to be fighting for a chance at the final. Jake's sector 2 looked very promising there. These next 2 corners are extremely deceptive. It's very easy to go wide on them, but Jake plays it safe, barely touching the curb on the outside, putting it over the sausage curb a little bit, kind of splitting 2 wheels on that outside curb on the final corner. Barrett's on line to do essentially the same, but he tucks it in a little bit more. It doesn't even look like he touched the outside curb there, but he did hit that inside sausage curb, which naturally will make your car understeer and flow out there a little bit more. Jake did not improve last lap. We haven't seen much from our other drivers so far. Again, no risk for elimination in this round, so our bottom drivers, they can't be horribly upset with themselves yet, but there is a lot of room for improvement when it comes to consistency. Lap times you pretty much want to have worked out through practice and qualifying, but consistency is what these heat races are going to help for. They'll keep you on the track for a race distance so you can kind of gauge where you want to be with the car so that you don't make any more mistakes. But every individual race has its own qualifying. You'll get around 3 or 4 laps out of those usually. We haven't seen any yellows, we haven't seen any camera cuts to mistakes so far, which leads me to believe that our drivers might have finally gotten a little bit more of a grip on keeping the cars on the road and under control. Now they just have to tweak out how to get closer to the 130 mark, the low 130 mark, preferably 29s if you can, but only a couple of drivers we've seen so far have been able to even be close to that. Jake's, of course, one of those drivers in this heat race, but other ones that you can look out for is Paulson, who we'll introduce here next race, I believe. We have Cooper here as well. He'll probably be able to get into the 29s. Jackson's most likely to get into the 29s. But who knows, maybe some of our new drivers who haven't actually raced before, who we haven't seen practice before, might also be able to get close or into the 29s. You never know with these. There's always such a big difference in car and track. You'd expect, the same outcome every race, but honestly, there's a lot of variation. That helps to kind of shake it up. You can't just stay in one discipline that someone's a natural at and have them win everything. Our last 3 have been massive jumps. Our first one was Formula 3, and then we went to 1950s German compact cars, and now we're in Pragas. So that's a pretty wide spread of race cars there already. We went from the Vallerbahnen, which is a lesser known track that's fairly well maintained, and then there's also that racetrack in Sweden, which was the first racetrack in Sweden, and that had a very bumpy surface. Now we're at the Red Bull Ring, which Formula 1 races at, so naturally it's essentially a great FIA Grade A circuit. It's very smooth, it's well maintained, the gravel traps and all that make really good sense, and they're designed to make the racing good. As we see Waleed go on and off of the sausage curb through technically 3. His best lap so far is only good enough for 133.164. So he's a little bit behind, but we know he has at least 2 more seconds in him. Jake's going to cross the line again. We'll see if he improves. He does not improve. He's still at 130.86. And there's only around 40 seconds left on the clock. So this will be the final lap. He may be able to improve, but I don't think he has to for this heat race. Across all the heat races, we all put all the drivers together based on their time, so it's not just in this run. Ideally, he does want to have the top time out of everybody, but it's alright to be just top in your race, which he might be unless he can put a really good lap together. And who knows, maybe in a racing environment, a 139 is about as good as it will get. Maybe that will be the top time from the heat races. We're going to ride all the way home with Jake to see what kind of line she's taking and whether or not he's improving. Since we haven't seen a lot of his other laps, we can't really tell. But from what we can see from just the cameras and on the data, he has a good line. I think he has good braking. It looks, it just looks like a decent time. Most of the laps look like pretty decent times unless there's a spin or an off. But this one looks pretty solid. He's using a lot of the curbing, using a lot of the track, getting on the throttle at the right time, braking late. We'll see how he does through here. This is always a very difficult section. Onto the curb a lot more than he was last time out we watched him. Onto that sausage curb again, and not so much curb there, but that's not a bad thing. We'll see how he does. On this final lap, he takes the checkered flag and cuts it down to a 130.531. That is a 3/10 of an improvement. Not bad. If that was just the heat race, he'll have plenty more chances to get a faster lap out of that car. That's a big gap too. That was essentially the kind of race that you would like to have on the final. There was no spin, there was no off, there was no yellow. Sure, he had a couple of laps invalidated, but that's not necessarily a bad thing when it comes to the racing. When you get a penalty, obviously that's bad. And the penalties in this software in Race Room are really harsh. We'll take a look at everyone else's lap since that's what matters. Working our way down, Barrett got a 131.272. Not a bad lap for a first outing. Mitch is going to have a 132.4. A little bit of room for improvement. We've seen Mitch do well before. Coulter finished with a 133.95. Not too strong of a lap, but not too bad for his first outing. Waleed only managed a 133.1. and Trevor only managed a 135.45. It is just the first race, and this is just a heat race, so they have plenty of time to improve. We'll see you in the next one.